my name is Kristin and this is Kristin Kraves Books. So I'm here to talk about all the fantastic books that are on my radar that come out in October. September has flown by, but like everybody else on BookTube, October is my favorite month of reading. I'm ready for all the spooky books, all the witchy books, all the vampire books. Give it all to me, that's all I want. But surprisingly, a lot of the books that are coming out in October that are on my radar are not really fitting for October. There are like 7 holiday romances coming out in October. But I'm just not even going to talk about in this video. I talk about them on my blog, and I will link to that if you're interested. But I'm going to do a future video talking about those, maybe reading a few of those, because I do have a lot of arcs of them. It just, October seems too early to be talking about Christmas and holiday romances. It just does. I start them in November. I'm Canadian, so by November 1st, our Thanksgiving is long over. So once November hits, I'm ready for all the festive activities, but it's just too soon right now. So if you want to know more about those, stay tuned for a future video. But there's a lot of other genres of books that are coming out this month that I cannot wait for, so let's dive into those. Starting with October 4th, we have a YA contemporary, and I've moved away from YA contemporary, but there are some tried and true authors who I love, who I always pick up, and Melinda Lowe has become one of those authors for me. She wrote The Last Night of the Telegraph Club, which won a ton of awards, was well deserving, really enjoyed that book. And her new one is called Scatter of Light. And this follows Aria, who goes on a family vacation to Martha's Vineyard, and some kind of scandal happens there, and she's sent to California to live, I believe, with her aunt. And she thinks that her summer is ruined, her life is over, but she quickly falls in love with California. She gets a crush on a girl, she starts to question her identity, and she falls in love with, like, I think there's a found family trope here, a group of LGBT teenagers, and I've heard some great things, and I just trust this author. This cover is stunning, and I'm not sure if I'll get to it in October, but I hope to get to it before the end of the year because I just love The Last Night of the Telegraph Club, and I'm looking for anything similar to that. Now this one's kind of random, but I saw this cover, and with the teaser for The Little Mermaid live action coming out and all that stuff, I'm excited about this, and I've always been a Prince Eric girl. So this is Prince of the Song and Sea by Lindsay Miller, and this is more about Eric's story, and I think that there is a curse on his family. The curse is that he will die if he kisses anybody that is not his true love, so you know that typical trope, and he's been cursed by a sea god, we know who that is, or a sea witch, and we know who that is. So he is either on the search to find his true love or to kill the sea witch. So I think that could be fun. I'm into that idea. I do love Prince Eric. It'd be interesting to see his story. This next one is perfect for October, and I really want to get to it, and that is The Restless Dark by Erica Waters, who wrote The River Has Teeth, which came out last year. I meant to read it. Was on my, I think, October releases video of last year, and I just never got to it, but I heard good things. And this one is following a character who was almost a victim of a serial killer, but she saw him fall off a cliff and die, but his body was never found. And then this podcast is putting together some kind of contest where whoever finds his bones wins a prize, which is kind of morbid and gross in my mind. And she decides to participate because she's being haunted by this man's ghost, and she thinks if she can find his body, it'll release the ghost somehow. And I think we also follow a few other characters who are participating in this contest and their reasons why. So that's a really original idea. Could be very creepy and disturbing, and I'm up for it. I've rediscovered my love of historical fiction lately, and I think this one is going to be really good for me, and this is Hester by Laurie Lico Albanese, and this is set, let me see the years, the early 1800s. So we're following a character named Isabel who travels across the ocean from England to Salem with her husband Edward, and then her husband decides to go on some sea journey and leaves her stranded here by herself, and she forms a connection with a man called Nathaniel Hawthorne, who you might recognize that name. And I think they have like dark secrets. I actually thought there was a line in here that was really intriguing. It says, as weeks pass and Edward's safe return grows increasingly unlikely, Nathaniel and Isabel grow closer and closer. Together, they are a muse and a dark storyteller, the enchanter and the enchanted, but which is which? So I think that could be really, really good. And then I think there are a lot of important themes in here as well, it says, interwoven with Isabel and Nathaniel's story is a vivid interrogation of who gets to be real American in the first half of the 19th century, a depiction of the early days of the Underground Railroad in New England, and atmospheric interstitials that capture the long history of unusual women being accused of witchcraft. So all topics I think are interesting to read about. I always appreciate a book that talks about witches but also has some social commentary, because there's a lot of that behind the whole idea of witches and witchcraft. So looking forward to that one. I'm hoping it gives me Magic Lessons by Alice Hoffman vibes a little bit, because that's what I'm getting from this one, sort of. So I'm looking forward to that. Next is another one that's good for fall. This is Jackal by Erin E. Adams, and this follows a character named Liz who hates her hometown. She is a black woman who grew up in a town mostly of white people, and she has to go back, I believe, for a wedding. And then at this wedding, somebody goes missing, a young girl goes missing into the woods, and there's a search party for her, but Liz is having all these memories of a black woman going missing 10 years ago, who was later found with her chest cavity ripped open. And she does some research and realizes that this has been happening to black women in this town for years, and she's researching the history of that and uncovers the town's secrets. I think it's going to be a hard read, a dark read, but a perfect read for October. And now moving on to October 11th, one I know a lot of us are excited for is Lower Olympus Volume 3. I still don't have Volume 2, I haven't read it yet. These are expensive collections because they're so detailed. It's graphic novels, the artwork is beautiful, but it's really I have to treat myself to one of those volumes, and I just never do it. So I read the first one, loved it. These are Hades and Persephone retellings. The color palette's stunning. It's a popular web comic, so that I think you can get for free. So if you're interested, look that up. But the collections are just so stunning. They're beautiful to have on your shelves, and the second one came out earlier this year, so they're just pumping these out, which is awesome. This next one is middle grade, and I don't read a lot of middle grade, but I just love this author, and that is Where the Lost Ones Go by Kimi Bowman. And this one is just following a young girl whose grandmother passes away, and she really wants to prove that ghosts are real so that she can know that her grandmother is still with her. And I think she connects with some other young girl in a haunted house, and they discover that maybe ghosts are real, but they're stuck and they're losing their memories and they need to be freed. So they work together, and I think they have like a little crush on each other and stuff. It looks really sweet, and I just love Kimi Bowman so much. So I will try anything that she writes. Okay, this next one looks so fun. It is a romance, and it's called Mistakes Were Made by Meryl Weisner, and we're following a university student who, I'm guessing she doesn't have much of a connection with her family because she decides to escape to a bar during family weekend at her university. She ends up having a one-night stand with an older woman. They have a great time. She wakes up in the morning, thinks that's all that will come of it. She goes to breakfast with her roommate and her roommate's mom, and her roommate's mom ends up being the woman that she hooked up with the night before, and maybe they have real feelings for each other. So I think that could be interesting and a good time, and a nice one to break up some of the spookier books I have on this list. This next book has to have one of the most beautiful covers I've ever seen, and if you know anything about me, you know I'm a sucker for a stunning cover. And this is If You Could See the Sun by Anne Lang. And this follows a young girl who is the only person on scholarship at this elite boarding school in Beijing, and she's always felt invisible there. Then she realizes that maybe she is actually invisible. She can actually turn invisible. And then she finds out that her parents can no longer afford to send her there, even though she does have a scholarship. And she thought maybe there was a way to monetize her abilities, and she starts to sell people's secrets, or secrets they want to find out about people, because she can go into a room, be invisible, learn the secret, and then sell it to other students. And I think she kind of falls into the darkness of that, and then battles with the ethics of it all. So that's a unique premise. We'll see what I think about that one, but I definitely want to try it. Now this next one has a haunting cover. The subject matter is going to be a tough one, I think, but I do want to try it, and that is Darkroom Etiquette by Rowe, who wrote, what's that one with cages? A List of Cages. I remember that came out a while ago and so many people loved it at the time. But this one follows a young teenage boy who is kidnapped and kept in a walled room, and maybe finds out that everything he thought about his life is not true. And he is trying to survive and trying to escape, and wants to get out before the lines are too blurred between fact and fiction. And I just think it's going to be an intense read, very dark, but probably worth it in the end, because I know that this author is popular and I've heard great things. This next one looks like a fun one. It is called The Spare Man by Mary Robinette Cowell, who wrote the Daillencourt Star series, which I think is on Kindle Unlimited, and I have the first one and I really want to get to it. But this one follows a woman who is an heiress. I think she's an inventor, and she is on her honeymoon, and she has some anonymity there, and she's loving that nobody knows who she is. And she's on I think the ship that they're on is traveling between Mars and the moon, which is so much fun. But then somebody is murdered and her new husband is being arrested for the crime. So of course she has to solve the case, and that just looks cute and fun. And I just love the whole idea of it being like a sci-fi mystery on an intergalactic spaceship between Mars and the moon, and some woman on her honeymoon. I just think all the elements come together are really gonna work for me. Okay, now moving on to October 18th. This is probably my most anticipated book of the entire month. I love this author. I actually have an arc of this waiting for me at home. This is one of the last videos you'll see in this location, which makes me sad because it really means summer is over. But I'm ready to go back home, get into the fall groove, get this arc in my hands. And this is The Ghost Woods by C.L. Cook, who wrote The Lighthouse Witches, which I read last year and was one of my top 10 books of the year. I just love this author's take on witches, so I'm excited to have another one by them. And to be honest with you, I didn't even read the synopsis too hard, because once this arc was offered to me, I knew I was going to take it. I love this author. I love her take on witches, so I'm down for it. But I think this is set in a home for unwed mothers is the vibe that I'm getting from this one. And our main character ends up in this home and thinks maybe there's something sinister going on here. Maybe it is haunted. Let's see what it says. Yeah, then she meets a mysterious mother and young boy who live on the grounds, and together they begin to unpick the secrets of this place. So I just trust the atmosphere that this author can create. So looking forward to that highly. You will see a recent reads video of that in the future, because as soon as I get home, I'm dropping everything and reading that one. Next is When We Were Sisters by Fatima Asghar, and I'm going to read you the first synopsis of this one because I think it really sums it up beautifully. And it says, Fatima Asghar traces the intense bond of 3 orphan siblings who, after the parents die, are left to raise one another. The youngest grapples with the incomprehensible loss of her parents, as she also charts out her own understanding of gender. The middle sister spares with her crybaby younger sibling as she desperately tries to hold on to her sense of family in an impossible situation. And the eldest does her best in the role of sister mother, while also trying to create a life for herself on her own terms. So I like any book that explores grief, that explores sisterhood. I don't know that I've read a book where sisters are forced to raise one another and what that must be like. I've heard beautiful things about this already, so I think that is going to be fantastic. This next one I feel like I've been waiting for forever. This is Paris Daillencourt is About to Crumble by Alexis Hall, who you know I love. I think I've read 3 books by Alexis Hall already this year. This will be my 4th, but I read the first book in this series, Rosalind Palmer Takes the Cake, earlier in the year. Loved it. So I'm excited to get more from this little universe that Alexis Hall has created, because the first one took place on this baking show, and this next one does as well. It's just a different season. So we were following a main character who doesn't really believe in himself and his skills when it comes to baking, but does really well in the show, but also has a romance, falls in love with a different contestant, but I think deals a lot with the anxieties that he has throughout the whole process, which is something I really appreciate about Alexis Hall. I find a lot of his romances deal with mental health in a way that is very visceral and very honest and so authentic and just gritty. And I think if you suffer from mental health issues in any way, anxiety especially is what I find the representation that Alexis Hall puts in his books. If you deal with that at all, I think that you will see yourself in these characters. And if, as you know, I like anything to do with foodie romances. If it's a foodie romance, I'm gonna read it, but I already know that I like the first book in this series. I like the whole competition. It's very much Great British Bake Off, what goes on behind the scenes, and there's a lot of drama there, so I'm ready for this one. These covers that look like pieces of art are really popular lately, and I love them, and this one it really caught my eye, and this is Self-Portrait with Nothing by Amy Powatka, and this is, the tagline says, a picture can paint 1,000 words, and we're following a character who was adopted, and she discovered who her birth mother was years prior, but never said anything because her mother is a famous artist who believes that her paintings can bring you into parallel universes. and I think she kind of questions the authenticity of that, but then maybe they connect and this is all true. So I just want to, that's all I want to know. That's intriguing enough for me, and I really do love these artsy covers. And I've said this for years, any book that explores art in some way, I am going to be drawn to. John Marrs is interesting. I have read The One, and it is one of my favorite thrillers of all time, but his new one doesn't sound anything like that one. This one sounds very different. It doesn't seem to have that sci-fi element to it. It just seems to be a straight up thriller, but I'm willing to try it. It is called Keep It in the Family, and it might actually have some more paranormal elements to it. It's about this couple who buy a home and they're trying to restore it and make it their dream home, and she is pregnant, and they find some writing on the wall that says, "I will save them from the attic." And they explore the attic and realize that something very gruesome and terrible happened in this home, and maybe it is haunted. And I think that the female character in this is really struggling with this, raising a child in this, and it gets very dark. So sounds spooky. It might be the kind of thriller that I like. So I know that I can like John Marrs, so I'm willing to try that one. Then we have Nothing Sung, Nothing Spoken by Nita Tyndale, and this is a YA historical fiction that is giving me kind of Last Night at the Telegraph Club vibes, and that is why I added it to my TBR. It takes place in Berlin in 1938, and it is following these teenagers who meet up in like these underground bars and have little romances, but obviously they have Hitler's regime reigning over them, so they have that heaviness over the whole situation, but they're still just trying to be teenagers, and I have a feeling it's going to be heartbreaking. I know it's sapphic as well, and I did discover after reading Salt to the Sea earlier this year that I can like YA historical fiction, so I am willing to give this one a try if it's anything like The Last Night at the Telegraph Club. And then moving on to October 25th, we have Sign Here, and I just love the cover, and sent in a few videos that I like campy horror, and this gives me that vibe. And this is by Claudia Lux, and it says it's a darkly humorous, surprisingly poignant, and utterly gripping debut novel about a guy who works in hell, literally, and is on the cusp of a big promotion if only he can get one more member of the wealthy Harrison family to sell their soul. So that's all I need to know about that one. That is like a campy vibe I'm looking for. So I don't think I've ever read a book set in hell, so I'm down for it. So I have a lot more that are on my list, but this video would be way too long. So I'm just gonna leave a link to the blog post down below because that's where all the Christmas romances are. I have a few more YA ones, a few more horror ones that I've read the synopsis many times. It's just convoluted. I'll let you read those for yourself. And I would love to know what October release you are most excited for. Let me know that in the comments down below. I will talk to you again soon. Thanks for your support. Bye for now.